Admiral Kyung-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Harmony. The massive ship moved through space like a silver arrow, leading 36 other vessels toward the small yellow star called Sol. Behind him, officers from 12 different alien species worked at their stations. Their mission was simple: find out what these new creatures called humans could do in a fight. The Galactic Coalition had been watching Earth for 8 months now. The humans had just learned how to travel faster than light, which made them babies, compared to most spacefaring races. Their ships looked ugly and rough, nothing like the smooth, curved vessels that advanced civilizations built. Most Coalition members thought humans were just another primitive species that would bow down when they saw real power. Commander Hye-jin walked up to the Admiral's chair. She was tall and thin, with the pale blue skin of her people. Her large eyes showed no emotion as she spoke. "Sir, we are 3 hours from the outer edge of their solar system. Our scouts report one human ship near the big planet they call Jupiter." Kyung-ho nodded. He had been in the Coalition fleet for 40 years and had seen dozens of first contact missions. They all went the same way. The new species would see the mighty Coalition fleet, realize how outmatched they were, and quickly agree to join as junior members. The humans would be no different. "What does the human ship look like?" he asked. Hye-jin touched her datapad. "It appears to be conducting training exercises near Jupiter's moons. The vessel is roughly 800 meters long, gray in color, and has a very angular design. Our engineers say it looks like it was built by people who care more about function than beauty." Captain Do-won's voice came through the communication system from his escort ship, the Silver Dawn. "Admiral, I've been studying the human ship designs in our database. They look like metal boxes with engines stuck on the back. How did such an ugly species ever make it to space?" Several officers on the bridge laughed quietly. Kyung-ho allowed himself a small smile. Do-won was young and sometimes spoke without thinking, but he wasn't wrong. Human ships did look primitive compared to the elegant vessels of the Coalition. Lieutenant Bo-ram approached from her science station. She was the fleet's expert on alien biology and psychology. Her people were known for their ability to understand other species quickly. "Admiral, I have completed my study of human behavior patterns. They are a very young species, only about 200,000 years old. They show high levels of aggression and territorial behavior, but they also seem to care deeply about their own kind." "Are they dangerous?" Kyung-ho asked. Bo-ram shook her head. "Not to us, sir. They fight with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Their most powerful weapons use nuclear fission, which is thousands of years behind our technology. They have never faced an enemy with energy shields or plasma weapons. I believe they will surrender quickly when they see what we can do." The Admiral looked out at the stars ahead. In his long career, he had seen species much more advanced than humans give up without a fight. The key was to show overwhelming force, right from the start. Let them know they had no chance of winning, and most intelligent species would choose to live rather than die for nothing. "Captain Taemin," he called to his intelligence officer. "What do we know about human military tactics?" Taemin was a serious man who rarely smiled. He had studied every piece of information about humans that their spies had gathered. "They appear to favor group tactics, Admiral. They work together well and use coordinated attacks. However, their weapons are very limited in range. They have to get close to their enemies to be effective. This should not be a problem for us." Kyung-ho felt confident. The Coalition fleet had weapons that could destroy targets from light minutes away. Human ships would be turned to dust before they could even see what was shooting at them. "Sir," called Lieutenant Mi-young from the sensor station, "we are now entering the outer edge of the Sol system. The human patrol ship has not detected us yet." This was expected. Coalition stealth technology was far beyond anything humans could imagine. Their ships could pass right next to human vessels without being seen. It was another advantage that would make this mission easy. Maintain. Stealth protocols, Kyung-ho ordered. I want to observe this human ship for a while before we make contact. On the main screen, the human vessel came into view. It was just as ugly as the reports had said. The ship looked like someone had welded together several metal boxes and added some engines. There were no smooth curves or artistic designs. Everything was angles and straight lines. It looked more like a tool than a work of art. "Look at that thing," whispered Captain Yoon-ji from her science vessel. "It looks like they built it in a junkyard." But as Kyung-ho watched the human ship move, something bothered him. The vessel wasn't just floating around randomly. It moved, with purpose, following specific patterns around Jupiter's largest moon. The humans were clearly practicing something, but what? "Bo-ram," he said. "What kind of training do you think they're doing?" The young scientist studied her instruments. "It appears to be some kind of tactical exercise, Admiral. They're practicing attack and defense maneuvers, but against what enemy? As far as we know, humans have never fought a space battle." This was puzzling. Why would a species practice space combat when they had never fought anyone in space? Most young civilizations focused on exploration and peaceful contact when they first reached the stars. They didn't prepare for war until they met hostile neighbors. "Perhaps they're just naturally paranoid," suggested Commander Jin-woo. "Some species assume everyone they meet will be an enemy." Kyung-ho nodded, but he still felt uneasy. Something about the human ship's movements seemed too professional, too practiced. These didn't look like beginners learning how to fly in space. They moved like veterans who had done this many times before. "Sir," reported Mi-young, "I'm detecting more human ships at the edge of our sensor range. They appear to be on patrol routes throughout their solar system." "How many ships do they have?" Kyung-ho asked. "At least 20 vessels that I can detect, possibly more. They're spread out across the entire system, maintaining what looks like a defensive perimeter." The Admiral frowned. A defensive perimeter? That suggested the humans were expecting trouble. But from where? As far as Coalition intelligence knew, humans had never met another spacefaring species. Why would they be so ready for a fight? "Begin final approach," he ordered. "It's time to introduce ourselves to humanity." Admiral Kyung-ho gave the order that would change everything. "All ships, drop stealth systems and take standard first contact formation. We will approach the human vessel at maximum weapons range." Across the Coalition fleet, 37 ships suddenly appeared in space like ghosts becoming solid. The Eternal Harmony led the formation, its hull gleaming silver in the light of the distant sun. Behind it, warships from a dozen different worlds spread out in a perfect display of power and organization. The human ship's response was immediate. Within seconds of the Coalition fleet appearing, the ugly gray vessel lit up with activity. Lights came on across its hull, and energy readings spiked on Coalition sensors. "Interesting," muttered Captain Taemin from his intelligence station. "Most species take several minutes to react to our appearance. The humans responded in less than 10 seconds. Commander Hyojin checked her tactical display. "Sir, the human ship has powered up all its systems. I'm reading energy signatures I don't recognize." Kyung-ho wasn't worried. Unknown energy signatures were normal when meeting a new species. Every civilization developed technology differently. What mattered was that the human ship was alone against 37 Coalition vessels. The math was simple. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. "Use standard first contact protocols." Lieutenant Won-jae worked at the communication station. The Coalition had developed these protocols over thousands of years of meeting new species. They would send greetings in multiple languages, including some basic human languages their computers had learned from monitoring Earth's broadcasts. "Channel open, sir," Won-jae reported, "transmitting standard greeting package now." The message went out into space, carrying offers of peace and friendship, along with subtle demonstrations of Coalition technological superiority. It explained that the Galactic Coalition was a peaceful organization dedicated to bringing order and prosperity to the galaxy. It invited humanity to join this great community of civilized worlds. The human response came back quickly. Too quickly. Most species needed time to decode the coalition's message and prepare a proper reply. The humans answered in less than 2 minutes. "Coalition vessels," came a calm male voice speaking perfect coalition standard. "This is Commander Park of the United Earth ship Defiant. Identify yourselves and state your intentions in this system." Several officers on the bridge looked surprised. The human was speaking coalition standard fluently, which should have been impossible. More concerning was his tone. He wasn't speaking like someone who was amazed or frightened by first contact with aliens. He sounded like a professional giving a routine challenge to unknown ships. "How do they know our language?" whispered Lieutenant Mi-young. Commander Jin-woo pulled up linguistic data on his screen. "Sir, according to our records, no human has ever heard Coalition Standard before. Our xenolinguistics team estimated it would take them months to learn even basic phrases." Kyung-ho felt his first real moment of concern. But he pushed it aside. There had to be a logical explanation. Perhaps human computers were better at translation than expected. "1J, respond to their transmission. Tell them we are representatives of the Galactic Coalition, here on a peaceful mission of first contact." The communication went out, and again the response came quickly. Commander Park's voice remained steady and professional. "Coalition fleet, you will maintain your current position while we establish proper diplomatic protocols. Any attempt to approach closer will be considered a hostile act." The bridge fell silent. In 40 years of first contact missions, Admiral Kyung-ho had never heard a newly discovered species give orders to a coalition fleet. Usually, they begged for mercy or offered immediate surrender. Captain Do-won's voice crackled over the ship-to-ship communication. "Admiral, did that primitive just tell us what to do?" "Silence on the channel," Kyung-ho snapped. He didn't want the humans to hear any disrespect in coalition communications. But privately, he was beginning to feel annoyed. These humans needed to learn their place in the galactic order. Captain Yoon-ji spoke from her science vessel. "Admiral, I'm getting some very strange readings from the human ship. Their power output is much higher than it should be for a vessel of that size and apparent technology level." "Explain," Kyung-ho demanded. "Sir, based on what we can see of their hull design and apparent construction methods, that ship should be generating maybe 10% of the power we're detecting. Either our sensors are malfunctioning, or there's more to their technology than meets the eye." Lieutenant Bo-ram looked up from her biological studies. "Admiral, I'm also detecting something unusual. The human ship's crew size appears to be much smaller than expected. A vessel that size should need at least 500 crew members, but I'm only reading life signs for about 150 people." This was becoming more puzzling by the minute. How could a ship run with such a small crew? Coalition vessels needed large crews because of the complexity of their systems. Advanced automation existed, but it required technology that primitive species shouldn't possess. "Sir," called Captain Sung-min from his heavy cruiser, "I'm detecting more human ships moving toward our position. They're not rushing, but they're definitely coming our way." On the tactical display, red dots began appearing at the edges of the screen. Human ships were converging on their location from throughout the solar system. They moved in formation, maintaining precise distances and following coordinated flight patterns. "How many ships?" Kyung-ho asked. "7 so far, Admiral." "No. Make that 10. They're appearing from behind moons and asteroids where we couldn't detect them before." Commander Hye-jin studied the human ship movements with growing unease. "Sir, these don't look like patrol ships being called in to help. These movements are too coordinated, too precise. It's like they were already in position and just waiting for a signal." The Admiral watched the tactical display as more human ships continued to appear. 12 ships now, all moving with the same professional precision as the first vessel they had encountered. None of them were rushing toward the coalition fleet in panic or desperation. Instead, they moved like pieces on a game board, taking up positions that created overlapping fields of fire. 1J, contact the human commander again. Ask why they are moving additional ships into this area. The communication went out, and Commander Park's response was immediate. Admiral Kyung-ho, we are simply ensuring that proper security protocols are maintained during first contact. Surely you understand the need for reasonable precautions when meeting an unknown force. The fact that the human knew his name and rank sent a chill down Kyung-ho's spine. That information hadn't been included in any of their transmissions. How could the humans possibly know who was in command of the coalition fleet? Sir, whispered Captain Tae-min, they're listening to our internal communications. They have to be. There's no other way they could know your identity. But that was impossible. Coalition communication systems used quantum encryption that couldn't be broken by primitive technology. Even if the humans had somehow intercepted their signals, they shouldn't be able to decode them. Lieutenant Mi-young's voice was tight with worry. Admiral, I count 15 human ships now, and they're still coming. They're taking up defensive positions in a sphere around us. Kyung-ho looked at the tactical display with growing alarm. The humans weren't just responding to the coalition's arrival. They were implementing what looked like a well-practiced defense plan. Every ship took up a position that maximized their coverage while minimizing their exposure to return fire. These movements are too good, muttered Commander Jin-woo. They're moving like they've done this before. But done what? Humans have never fought a space battle. Captain Yu-jin spoke up from her position at the sensor station. Sir, I'm detecting some kind of scanning beams coming from the human ships. They're using sensor systems I don't recognize. Are they targeting us? Kyung-ho asked. I can't tell, sir. The scanning patterns are unlike anything in our database, but they're definitely gathering detailed information about our ships. The Admiral realized that what had started as a routine first contact mission was becoming something else entirely. The humans weren't acting like a primitive species meeting advanced aliens for the first time. They were acting like an experienced military force that had prepared for this exact situation. Commander Park's voice came over the communication system again. Admiral, we have completed our initial assessment of your fleet. We are prepared to begin formal diplomatic contact when you are ready to proceed according to established protocols. Established protocols? What protocols? The humans had never met aliens before. How could they have established protocols for something that had never happened? But what worried Admiral Kyung-ho most was the phrase, initial assessment. It suggested that the humans had been studying the coalition fleet just as carefully as the coalition had been studying them. And somehow, the Admiral had the feeling that the humans had learned more in the past hour than the coalition had learned in 8 months of observation. 3 hours had passed since the coalition fleet first appeared in the Sol system. What should have been a simple first contact mission had become a tense standoff between two fleets. Admiral Kyung-ho stared at the tactical display where 15 human ships now surrounded his 37 vessels in a loose sphere. The humans had not made any threatening moves, but they also had not backed down. Their ships maintained perfect formation, each vessel exactly where it needed to be to provide maximum coverage. It was the kind of coordination that usually took years of training to achieve. Sir, reported Captain Sung-min from his heavy cruiser, the human fleet has grown to 18 ships. They keep arriving from different parts of the system, but they're not rushing. Every movement is planned and precise. Commander Hye-jin looked troubled as she studied her sensor readings. Admiral, I've been watching their tactical formation for the past hour. These are not the movements of ships that learned space combat. Recently, every position they take shows deep understanding of three-dimensional warfare. Lieutenant Bo-ram approached the Admiral's chair with a datapad in her hands. Her expression was worried. Sir, I've been analyzing human behavior patterns during this encounter. Something is very wrong with our intelligence reports. Explain, Kyung-ho said. Our original assessment said humans were a young, aggressive species that had just discovered faster-than-light travel. But their actions today don't match that profile. They're too calm, too organized, too prepared. This looks like a military force that has faced threats before. The Admiral felt a growing unease in his stomach. Everything about this mission was going wrong. The humans weren't reacting the way primitive species were supposed to react. They showed no fear, no wonder at meeting advanced aliens, no desire to surrender or seek protection. "Admiral," called Captain Yun-ji from her science vessel, "I'm detecting something odd about the human ship designs. Our initial scans showed crude, angular construction. But the longer I study them, the more I think we're missing something important." "What do you mean?" "Sir, what if those angular designs aren't crude? What if they're functional? Those strange shapes might serve purposes we don't understand." Before Kyung-ho could respond to this troubling thought, Lieutenant Mi-young spoke up from the sensor station. "Admiral, the humans are doing something. All their ships are powering up additional systems." On the main screen, the human vessels began to change. It started slowly, almost too subtle to notice. Then the changes became more obvious and much more frightening. The ugly, box-like hull of the Defiant began to shift. Sections that had looked like solid metal panels slid apart, revealing hidden spaces underneath. What the Coalition had taken for crude construction was actually sophisticated modular design. "By the ancient stars," whispered Commander Jinwoo. "Those aren't simple hull plates. They're retractable armor sections." As the Coalition officers watched in growing horror, every human ship in the fleet began the same transformation. Hull sections retracted, weapon ports opened, and systems that had been hidden came online. The angular designs that had seemed so primitive revealed their true purpose. They were not artistic choices, but engineering solutions. "Admiral," stammered Lieutenant Mi-young, "their power output just increased by 300% across the entire fleet. I'm reading energy signatures that don't match anything in our database." The human ship Defiant underwent the most dramatic change. Its hull expanded outward as hidden sections deployed, revealing that the vessel was nearly twice the size they had originally detected. Weapon arrays emerged from concealed bays, and what had looked like simple sensor equipment transformed into something far more sophisticated. Captain Do-won's voice came over the communication system, no longer mocking, but filled with shock. "Admiral, what are we looking at? These ships, they're not what they seemed." Admiral Kyung-ho stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The human fleet had just revealed itself to be something completely different from what Coalition intelligence had reported. These weren't primitive ships built by a young species. These were advanced warships designed by people who understood space combat better than anyone had imagined. "Sir," reported Captain Yujin, her voice tight with fear, "I'm detecting weapons systems on the human ships that I can't identify. The energy patterns are unlike anything we've encountered before." Lieutenant Boram looked up from her biological studies with wide eyes. "Admiral, I need to revise my assessment of human psychology. This level of tactical preparation, this coordination, this deception, these are not the actions of a primitive species. These people have been planning for this moment." Commander Park's voice came over the communication system, still calm, but carrying a new edge that made everyone on the bridge feel cold. "Coalition fleet, you will immediately power down your weapon systems and explain your hostile posture. You have 10 seconds to comply." The bridge fell silent. In all his years of service, Admiral Kyung-ho had never been given an ultimatum by a species the Coalition had come to evaluate. The humans were supposed to be the ones asking for mercy, not making demands. "Hostile posture?" whispered Captain Taemin. "We haven't even activated our weapon systems." But that wasn't quite true. The Coalition fleet had arrived with shields up and weapons ready, just as they always did during first contact. It was standard procedure designed to show strength and prevent any thoughts of resistance. What was different this time was that the other side wasn't intimidated. "Sir," called Commander Hee-jin urgently, "the human ships are targeting us. I'm reading weapons locks from multiple vessels." On the tactical display, red targeting beams reached out from the human fleet to touch each coalition ship. But these weren't the crude targeting systems they had expected from a primitive species. The locks were precise, instantaneous, and impossible to break. "How are they penetrating our electronic countermeasures?" demanded Kyung-ho. "I don't know, sir," Hye-jin replied. "Our jamming systems should make it impossible for their computers to maintain target locks, but their targeting beams are cutting through our defenses like they don't exist." Captain Wan-jae looked up from his communication station with a pale face. "Admiral, I think they've been listening to everything we've said since we arrived. Every private communication, every internal discussion, they know exactly what we've been thinking about them." The implications of this hit Admiral Kyung-ho like a physical blow. If the humans had been monitoring coalition communications from the beginning, then they knew the coalition had come here to evaluate humanity's military potential. They knew this wasn't really a peaceful first contact mission. "But that's impossible," protested Lieutenant Mi-young. "Our communication systems use quantum encryption. No primitive species should be able to break those codes." "Maybe they're not as primitive as we thought," said Commander Jin-woo quietly. Captain Yoon-ji's voice came over the ship-to-ship communication, filled with scientific excitement and terror. "Admiral, I've completed detailed scans of the human ship modifications. These aren't just weapon systems, they're weapons technologies that shouldn't exist." "Explain," Kyung-ho ordered. "Sir, the energy readings I'm getting suggest that human weapons operate on principles we don't understand. They're not using plasma or particle beams like we do. They're using something else, something that might be more advanced than our technology." The Admiral felt the world spinning around him. Everything the Coalition knew about humanity was wrong. These weren't primitive beings who had stumbled into space. They were an advanced species that had been hiding their true capabilities. "Commander," Park's voice filled the bridge again. "Admiral Kyung-ho, your 10 seconds have expired. I will ask once more. Power down your weapons and explain why you have approached our system in a military formation. This is your final warning." Admiral Kyung-ho looked around his bridge at the faces of his officers. For the first time in his long career, he saw real fear in their eyes. The mighty coalition fleet, which had never been challenged by any primitive species, was being threatened by ships they had dismissed as crude and harmless just hours before. The transformation of the human fleet was complete. 18 warships hung in space around them, no longer hiding what they truly were. Advanced weapons pointed at coalition vessels from multiple angles. Targeting systems that shouldn't exist maintained perfect locks despite the best electronic countermeasures the galaxy could produce. And somewhere on the human flagship, a commander who spoke perfect coalition standard waited for an answer to his ultimatum. Admiral Kyung-ho realized that the coalition fleet was no longer the hunter in this situation. Somehow, without anyone noticing, they had become the prey. Admiral Kyung-ho felt anger rising in his chest. For 40 years, he had commanded respect throughout the galaxy. No primitive species had ever dared to threaten a coalition fleet. These humans needed to learn their place in the cosmic order, and they needed to learn it now. "Charge weapons to 30%, he ordered. "Target the human flagship's engine systems. We'll show them what real power looks like." Commander Hye-jin hesitated at her tactical station. "Sir, are you sure? They seem to have advanced capabilities we don't understand." "They're bluffing," Kyung-ho snapped. "No species that just discovered space travel could have weapons that threaten coalition ships. Prepare to fire a warning shot. Across the coalition fleet, 37 ships powered up their weapon systems. Energy coursed through plasma conduits as particle beam arrays charged to firing capacity. The combined firepower represented the military might of a dozen advanced civilizations. On the tactical display, the human ships showed no reaction to this display of force. They maintained their positions calmly, as if the charging of coalition weapons meant nothing to them. This only made Admiral Kyung-ho more determined to show them their mistake. "Sir," warned Captain Yun-ji over the communication system. "I'm reading some very unusual energy signatures from the human ships. I recommend caution. All ships report ready to fire," announced Commander Haijin. Admiral Kyung-ho stared at the main screen where the human flagship Defiant hung in space. Its hull had transformed completely since their arrival, revealing advanced systems that shouldn't exist. But it was still just one ship against an entire fleet. "Fire," he ordered. The Coalition flagship's main particle beam lanced out across space, a brilliant blue-white lance of energy that could slice through any known material. The beam struck the Defiant's hull exactly where the Admiral had aimed, at the engine section that should have been its most vulnerable point. For a moment, Coalition officers allowed themselves to smile. Their most advanced weapon had found its target. The primitive human ship would be disabled, and this ridiculous standoff would be over. Then their sensors registered something impossible. "Admiral," stammered Lieutenant Mi-young, staring at her. Instruments in disbelief. "The human ship, it absorbed our weapon's energy, not just deflected it or blocked it. It absorbed it and channeled it into their own power systems." The bridge fell silent except for the humming of electronics. On the main screen, the Defiant showed no damage from the attack. Instead, its hull glowed slightly brighter than before, as if the Coalition's most powerful weapon had just given it more energy to work with. Commander Park's voice came over the communication system, still maddeningly calm. "Thank you for the demonstration, Coalition fleet. Your weapons technology is quite interesting. Now it's our turn." Captain Do-won's panicked voice crackled over the ship-to-ship communication. "Admiral, what just happened? How did they do that?" Before Admiral Kyung-ho could answer, the human flagship moved, not toward the Coalition fleet, but toward a large asteroid floating in space between the two forces. The asteroid was roughly the size of a small city, a chunk of rock and metal that had been drifting through space for millions of years. "Sir," reported Commander Jin-woo, "the human ship is targeting the asteroid. I'm reading massive energy buildup in their weapon systems." "What kind of weapon?" Kyung-ho demanded. I don't know, sir. The energy pattern doesn't match anything in our database, but the power levels are enormous." The Defiant fired a single shot. It wasn't the bright beam of a particle weapon or the glowing bolt of a plasma cannon. It was something else entirely, a wave of energy that seemed to bend space itself around the asteroid. What happened next would haunt the Coalition officers for the rest of their lives. The asteroid didn't explode. It didn't break apart or melt or vaporize. It simply ceased to exist. One moment, there was a mountain-sized chunk of rock and metal floating in space. The next moment, there was empty void, with only a faint shimmer of dissipating energy particles to show that anything had ever been there. "By all the gods," whispered Captain Yujin. "What kind of weapon can do that?" Lieutenant Boram worked frantically at her science station, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. "Admiral, according to my instruments, the asteroid's matter was converted directly into energy at the subatomic level. The entire mass was transformed instantaneously." "That should be impossible," protested Commander Haijin. "The energy required for that kind of matter conversion would be enormous. No ship could generate that much power." "Apparently human ships can," said Captain Taemin grimly. Admiral Kyung-ho stared at the empty space where the asteroid had been. In all his years of military service, he had never seen anything like it. The most advanced Coalition weapons could destroy large objects, but this was different. This was technology that could unmake matter itself. "Sir," called Lieutenant Mi-young, her voice barely steady, "I'm running calculations based on what we just observed. If each human ship carries weapons of that magnitude, they could eliminate our entire fleet in under 30 seconds. The words hit the bridge like a physical blow. 37 Coalition ships, representing the military might of the galaxies. Most advanced civilizations could be erased from existence in half a minute by these primitive humans. Commander Park's voice filled the bridge again. Admiral Kyung-ho, I trust that demonstration was educational. Human defensive capabilities are quite sufficient for protecting our territory. I suggest you reconsider any hostile intentions you might have harbored. Captain Won-jae looked up from his communication station with wide eyes. Sir, they're not just monitoring our communications, they're reading our thoughts, our intentions, our tactical plans. How else could they know we came here to test their military capabilities? Admiral Kyung-ho felt sweat beading on his forehead, despite the controlled temperature of the bridge. The humans hadn't just demonstrated superior weapons technology. They had revealed that they understood the Coalition's true purpose from the beginning. Sir, reported Captain Sung-min from his heavy cruiser, more human ships are arriving. I count 22 vessels now, and they're still maintaining that defensive formation around us. On the tactical display, new red dots appeared as additional. Human ships emerged from hiding places throughout the solar system. They moved with the same calm precision as the others, taking up positions that maximized their tactical advantage while minimizing their exposure to Coalition weapons. But now the Coalition officers understood what those weapons could do. Each human ship potentially carried the power to erase Coalition vessels from existence with a single shot. The 37-ship advantage the Coalition had enjoyed was meaningless against technology that could convert matter directly into energy. Admiral, said Commander Hye-jin quietly, I recommend we power down all weapons and request permission to withdraw from the system. For a proud officer who had never retreated from any enemy, the words were like poison. But Admiral Kyung-ho could see the fear in his crew's eyes. They had come here to evaluate human military potential and establish humanity's place in the galactic hierarchy. Instead, they had discovered that humans possessed technology that made Coalition weapons look like toys. Sir, added Captain Yoon-ji over the communication system, I'm detecting energy signatures from the human ships that suggest their demonstrated weapon was not their most powerful system. They appear to have capabilities they haven't revealed yet. The implication was terrifying. If the weapon that had unmade the asteroid wasn't their best technology, what else were the humans hiding? How much more advanced were they than anyone had imagined? Commander Park's voice came over the communication system one more time. Admiral, we have been monitoring your fleet communications for the past 4 hours. We know you came here to assess whether humanity poses a threat to your galactic coalition. Consider your assessment complete. The human commander paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. We suggest you return to your coalition and inform them that humanity seeks peaceful coexistence with all sentient species. However, we will not tolerate aggression or attempts at domination. We trust this demonstration has been sufficient to convey our position. Admiral Kyung-ho looked around his bridge at the faces of officers who had never known defeat. They had come to Sol System as representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. They were leaving as messengers carrying a warning that would shake the foundations of the Galactic Coalition. The humans had let them see exactly what they wanted them to see, enough to ensure the message would be carried home, but not enough to reveal the true extent of their capabilities. It was a masterful display of calculated restraint, masking overwhelming power. And Admiral Kyung-ho realized that the real demonstration wasn't the weapon that had destroyed the asteroid. It was the fact that 22 human warships were letting 37 Coalition vessels leave alive. The Coalition fleet began its long journey home in shameful silence. Admiral Kyung-ho sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical display as human ships escorted them to the edge of the Sol system. The escorts maintained a respectful distance, but their message was clear. The humans wanted to make sure their visitors actually left. As the hours passed, more human vessels continued to appear throughout the system. They emerged from behind planets, from asteroid fields, and from empty space where they shouldn't have been able to hide. Each new ship that revealed itself added to the growing horror of what the Coalition had discovered. Sir, reported Lieutenant Mi Young from the sensor station, I'm counting 38 human ships now visible in the system, but I keep detecting energy signatures that suggest there are more vessels we can't see. Captain Jae-sung spoke up from his escort vessel. Admiral, I've been studying the human ship movements for the past 6 hours. This isn't just a defensive fleet that was called together when we arrived. These ships were already in position, following patrol routes that covered the entire system. They've been ready for this. The implications of this observation sent chills through the coalition command structure. The humans hadn't scrambled to defend their territory when unknown aliens appeared. They had been prepared for exactly this situation, with ships positioned to respond to threats from any direction. Commander Hye-jin turned from her tactical station with a troubled expression. Admiral, I've been analyzing the human response, patterns, their reaction time, their coordination, their tactical positioning. None of this suggests a species that just learned space combat. This looks like a military force with decades of experience. Lieutenant Boram approached the admiral's chair with her datapad, her face pale with realization. Sir, I need to completely revise my assessment of human psychology and development. Everything we thought we knew about them was wrong. Explain, Kyung-ho said, though he dreaded what he might hear. Admiral, the humans didn't just develop faster than light. Travel recently. I think they've had it for much longer than we realized. Their level of tactical sophistication, their advanced weapons technology, their prepared defensive positions. This all suggests a species that has been spacefaring for generations. Captain Taeman's voice came over the communication system from his intelligence vessel. Admiral, I've been reviewing all our intelligence data about humanity. I think we've been deliberately deceived. The humans have been showing us exactly what they wanted us to see. A primitive species just beginning to explore space. But that was all an act. The bridge fell silent as the officers considered this possibility. The Galactic Coalition prided itself on its intelligence-gathering capabilities. The idea that a primitive species had fooled them so completely was almost impossible to accept. Sir, called Captain Yoon-ji from her science vessel, I'm detecting massive orbital installations around Earth and Mars that weren't visible on our original scans. They're showing up now because the humans are letting us see them. On the main screen, the tactical display updated to show enormous structures in orbit around the human homeworld. They were clearly artificial, clearly advanced, and clearly designed, for purposes the Coalition could only guess at. Those installations pulse with the same energy signatures as the weapon that destroyed the asteroid, reported Lieutenant Mi-young. There are dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They form a defensive network around the entire inner solar system. Admiral Kyung-ho felt his worldview crumbling around him. The Coalition had come to evaluate a primitive species and determine if they posed any threat to galactic order. Instead, they had discovered a civilization that possessed technology beyond. Their understanding and defensive capabilities that made their own fleets look pathetic. How long have they been watching us? Wondered Commander Jinwoo. If they could monitor our communications so easily, if they could hide their true capabilities so completely, what else do they know about the Coalition? Captain Yu-jin looked up from her sensor station with fear in her eyes. Admiral, I'm reading energy patterns from those orbital installations that suggest they could target objects at interstellar distances. If the humans wanted to, they could strike Coalition worlds from here. The thought was terrifying. The Coalition had always assumed that any species capable of interstellar warfare would announce themselves openly. The idea that humans could strike across light years without warning changed everything about galactic security. Commander Park's voice came over the communication system one final time as the Coalition fleet reached the edge of the Sol system. Admiral Kyung-ho, you and your fleet are free to leave. We trust you will carry an accurate report of what you've observed here back to your Coalition leadership. There was a pause before the human commander continued. We want you to understand that humanity has no desire for conquest or domination. We seek only to protect our territory and our people. However, we will not allow ourselves to be threatened or subjugated. We hope the coalition will choose peaceful coexistence over confrontation. The message was polite, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. The humans weren't asking for protection or begging to join the galactic community as junior members. They were establishing themselves as equals, or possibly superiors, and making it clear that any aggressive action would be met with devastating retaliation. As the Coalition fleet finally entered hyperspace for the journey home, Admiral Kyung-ho reflected on the disaster his mission had become. He had been sent to evaluate humanity's military potential and establish their place in the cosmic hierarchy. Instead, he was returning with news that would shake the Coalition to its foundations. Humans were not a primitive species stumbling into space. They were apex predators who had spent generations preparing for this moment. They had advanced technology, sophisticated tactics, and weapons that could unmake matter itself. Worst of all, they had been watching the Coalition long before the Coalition had discovered them. "Sir," said Commander Hae-jin quietly, "what do we tell the Coalition Council when we get home?" Admiral Kyung-ho considered the question carefully. How do you explain to the galaxy's most powerful civilizations that they had been outmaneuvered by a species they had dismissed as primitive? How do you tell them that humanity possessed technology that made Coalition weapons obsolete? "We tell them the truth," he said finally. "We tell them that humanity is not a species to be absorbed into our empire. They are something else entirely. A civilization that has turned the fundamental forces of the universe into weapons. We tell them that humans are no longer content to remain hidden among the stars." Lieutenant Mi-young looked up from her final sensor readings of the Sol system. "Admiral, those energy signatures from the orbital installations, they're still tracking us. Even though we're leaving the system, the humans are monitoring our exact position and course." The implication was clear. The humans could track Coalition ships across interstellar distances, which meant they could also target them if they chose to. The Coalition fleet wasn't just leaving in defeat. They were leaving alive only because the humans had decided to let them go. Captain Do-won's voice came over the ship-to-ship communication, subdued and frightened. "Admiral, in all our databases, in all our historical records, we've never encountered anything like this. What happens now?" Admiral Kyung-ho looked out at the stars ahead, knowing that each one might hide human ships with weapons that could erase Coalition worlds from existence. The galaxy had suddenly become a much more dangerous place, and the Coalition was no longer at the top of the food chain. "Now," he said quietly, "we hope that humanity meant what they said about seeking peaceful coexistence. Because if they ever decide that the Coalition is a threat to their security, there's nothing any of us could do to stop them." The Third Fleet continued its journey home, carrying a message that would change the galaxy forever. Humanity had revealed itself not as a primitive species seeking protection, but as a sleeping giant that had finally decided to open its eyes. The age of Coalition dominance was over, and a new chapter in galactic history was about to begin. And in the Sol system behind them, 22 human warships maintained their patrol routes, waiting patiently for whatever might come next from the stars.